The diplomatic station hung in the darkness between stars, a massive wheel of metal and glass that housed representatives from 47 different alien species. Station Kepler 442 was supposed to be a place of peace, where different civilizations came together to share knowledge and maintain harmony across the galaxy. The halls buzzed with strange languages, and creatures of every imaginable shape moved through the corridors with purpose. Dr. James Chen walked beside his wife Sarah, holding their daughter May's hand as they made their way through the botanical section. They were part of Earth's cultural exchange program, one of many human families invited to experience life among the stars. Humanity had only joined the Galactic Council 5 years ago, and they were still learning the complicated rules that governed interstellar society. May was 12 years old, bright-eyed and curious about everything. She had spent the morning asking questions about every alien plant they passed, writing notes in her tablet about the different colors and shapes. Her parents smiled at her enthusiasm, remembering when they had first seen these wonders themselves. "Can we go see the Zetherian garden?" May asked, pointing to a section marked with flowing purple symbols. "My teacher said their plants can sing when the wind touches them." Sarah checked her guide device. "It says that section is restricted to Zetherian personnel only. Maybe we can ask for a guided tour later." But May had already spotted something through the transparent wall, a flower that seemed to glow with its own light, petals shifting through colors like a rainbow caught in ice. Without thinking, she slipped away from her parents' side and found an open maintenance door that led into the restricted area. James noticed first. May. His voice rose with concern as he looked around the crowded corridor. Sarah's face went pale. Inside the Zetherian garden, May stood before the glowing flower. She had never seen anything so beautiful. The plant seemed to pulse with a soft rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. She reached out, her small fingers barely brushing the petals. The reaction was immediate. Alarms shrieked through the station. Zetherian guards materialized from hidden doorways, their tall, crystalline bodies refracting the harsh emergency lights. Ambassador Zelthar himself emerged from his meditation chamber, his usually calm aura now burning with fury. "The sacred lumina has been touched." His voice carried the weight of religious outrage. "A lesser species has defiled the living temple of our ancestors." May stumbled backward, terrified. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." James and Sarah burst through the door, security personnel trying to hold them back. Sarah's scream cut through the chaos as she saw her daughter surrounded by angry aliens. Ambassador Zelthar's decision was instant. His culture had maintained its sacred laws for 10,000 years, long before humans had discovered fire. The Lumina plant was not merely flora. It was a living connection to the Zetherian concept of the divine. To touch it without purification was the highest blasphemy, punishable by immediate death. He raised his neural disruptor, the weapon humming with charged particles. "By the ancient protocols and the law of my people, I execute judgment." "No." Sarah's cry echoed through the garden. The weapon fired. Mei-Chen died before her parents could reach her, her small body crumpling among the alien flowers she had found so beautiful. The next hours passed in a nightmare blur. Station security separated James and Sarah from their daughter's body. Council officials appeared with their tablets and scanning devices, documenting everything with cold efficiency. The Zetherian ambassador showed no remorse, simply stating that he had acted within the bounds of his cultural and religious law. Within a day, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session to address the incident. Representatives from all 47 species gathered in the Great Chamber, their various forms creating a bizarre assembly of the galaxy's diversity. Ambassador Kirthax of the Avilian hierarchy spoke first, his feathered crest flaring with agitation. This was a child, an unknowing child who made an innocent mistake. The Council Arbiter, an ancient being whose species had founded the Council millennia ago, responded with what they considered wisdom. "The Sovereign Species Act is clear. Each member civilization maintains absolute authority over their sacred spaces and cultural law. The human child violated Zetherian sacred ground. Ambassador Zelthar acted within his rights." Earth's ambassador, Marcus Webb, stood slowly. His hands trembled with barely controlled rage. "A child is dead. You're telling me that a flower is worth more than a human life? We understand your grief," the Arbiter continued, their tone suggesting they understood nothing at all. But the Council has maintained peace for 3,000 years precisely because we respect each species' sovereignty. The alternative is chaos, where every culture tries to impose its values on others. The vote was swift. 43 species supported the Zetherian ambassador's actions. Only 3 abstained. Not a single species voted to condemn the killing. The Council offered Earth a formal apology, carefully worded to admit no wrongdoing. They provided symbolic compensation, a monument in May's name on the station, a scholarship fund for human students. They expected humanity to accept this settlement with dignity, as other species had done when facing similar losses over the centuries. Ambassador Webb listened to the ruling in silence. When they finished, he carefully gathered his materials and stood. The entire chamber watched him, expecting protests, perhaps tears, maybe even threats of violence. Instead, his voice was perfectly calm, which somehow made his words more frightening. "You've made a grave miscalculation." He looked slowly around the chamber, meeting the eyes of each representative. "You think because we're new to the stars, because our fleet is small, that we'll accept this? You think we're like the other species who've swallowed their grief and bowed to your ancient laws?" He moved toward the exit, then paused. "You don't understand humans at all. We remember, we grieve, and we never ever forget when someone harms our children." His final words hung in the air like a promise. "We'll be in touch." Within hours, Earth recalled every human from Council space. Diplomats, traders, scientists, tourists, all were ordered home immediately. The embassy on Council Prime closed its doors. Human vessels in alien ports departed without explanation. James and Sarah Chen returned to Earth with their daughter's body, their hearts broken, but their resolve hardening. They met with Earth's military command, with the secret committees that oversaw humanity's hidden preparations. They learned about projects that had been running in the darkness beyond Earth's known space, preparations that humanity had made for this exact scenario. "They think 300 warships is our entire fleet," Admiral Patricia Okonkwo explained gently. "They have no idea what we've really been building." Sarah looked at the classified reports, her scientist's mind quickly grasping the implications. "The Shadow Navy," the Admiral nodded. "We've been preparing for this since we detected the first alien signals. We hoped we'd never need it. But if they think they can kill our children without consequence," she didn't need to finish the sentence. In the council chambers, most representatives had already dismissed the human reaction as grief-driven theatrics. But Ambassador Kirthax studied the recordings of Marcus Webb's departure with growing unease. He had made it his business to understand humanity, to study their history and psychology. "They've gone quiet," he warned the council in a follow-up session. "When humans go silent, they're not giving up. They're preparing." The Arbiter dismissed his concerns with a wave. "What can they do? They have 300 ships against our millions. If they want to sulk in their corner of space, let them." But Kirthax couldn't shake his growing dread. He had read about human history, about their wars and their capacity for patient, meticulous revenge. He had learned their saying, "Revenge is a dish best served cold." The galaxy was about to discover just how cold humans could be. 3 months had passed since Mei Chen's death. The Galactic Council had expected many possible responses from humanity. Rage, threats, perhaps even a desperate military strike that would be easily crushed. What they got instead was something far more disturbing: absolute silence. The human colonies that dotted the edge of Council space went dark. Not destroyed, not abandoned, simply silent. Communication arrays continued to function, but no messages came out. Supply ships arrived at human ports and found them closed. Their requests for docking denied with automated responses that provided no explanation. Trade routes that had carried human goods across the galaxy simply stopped. The unique medicines that Earth produced, the innovative technologies that human engineers had created, the cultural exports that had begun to find audiences among alien species, all of it ceased. It was as if humanity had pulled a curtain around itself and disappeared behind it. Ambassador Kirthax watched the situation develop with mounting anxiety. He had argued against the Council's ruling, had warned that humanity was different from other species. Now he saw his fears taking shape in ways he couldn't quite define. "What are they doing behind that wall?" he asked his intelligence officer, a squat Drelix with multiple sensory organs. The officer's tentacles writhed with confusion. "We don't know, sir. Every probe we send into human space either gets turned away at the border or simply vanishes. The ones that return show nothing unusual, just planets and stations continuing normal operations. But something feels wrong. What do you mean, wrong? The energy signatures don't match, sir. They're using too much power for normal operations, and there are gaps in the sensor data, places where our readings just stop. Across the galaxy, other intelligence agencies were discovering similar anomalies. Human freighters that should have been carrying trade goods were moving through deep space with unusual energy profiles. Construction materials were being ordered and shipped to coordinates that showed nothing but empty space on any star chart. The first real alarm came from the periphery monitoring stations. These automated outposts dotted the edges of Council space, watching for potential threats from unknown regions of the galaxy. One by one, they began going offline. At first, the Council attributed it to normal technical failures. Stations broke down sometimes, especially ones located in the harsh environment of deep space, but the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every station that went dark was positioned along the border with human space. "Send repair crews," ordered the Council's Minister of Defense, a hulking Korvax named Threx. "And arm them, just in case." The repair crews never found the stations. They would arrive at the coordinates to discover empty space. No debris, no signs of battle, no evidence that anything had ever been there. The stations had simply vanished, as if plucked from reality itself. Reconnaissance drones were dispatched next, equipped with every sensor technology the Council possessed. Most never returned. The few that did brought back footage that made no sense. Empty space, normal stellar radiation, nothing unusual. Yet the timestamps showed gaps, periods where the drones had recorded nothing at all, as if they had simply stopped existing for hours at a time. "They're using stealth technology," concluded Dr. Yura, the Council's chief scientist. She was a Virixian, her species known for their analytical minds, but nothing like we've ever seen. "This isn't just hiding from sensors. This is making objects cease to exist from our perspective." The Council chambers buzzed with worried conversation. Stealth technology was common enough. Every major species had ships that could hide from basic scanners. But complete invisibility? That was theoretical, something that required power sources beyond anything the Council had developed. "How advanced would they need to be to achieve this?" asked the Arbiter. Dr. Yura's response chilled the room. "Decades beyond us. Maybe more. Which means either they've made an impossible breakthrough in 3 months or..." She paused, the implications hanging heavy. "Or they've been working on this for much longer," finished Ambassador Kirthax, "since before they joined the Council. Maybe since before they even left their own solar system." The rumor started in the criminal underworld, in the black markets and smuggler havens where information flowed like water, whispers of something the humans called the Shadow Navy. No one could say where the term came from, but it spread like a virus through every species' intelligence network. Some said it was a single massive ship, large enough to destroy planets. Others claimed it was millions of tiny drones, invisible and everywhere. The more sensible analysts dismissed it as human psychological warfare, a myth designed to scare the Council into concessions. But then the incidents began. A Korvax patrol fleet reported strange sensor ghosts near the human border. Their instruments detected energy signatures indicating the presence of massive objects, but visual confirmation showed only empty space. When they investigated, their ship's systems experienced unexplained malfunctions, nothing critical, just enough to suggest someone else had touched their computers. A Virixian research station detected gravitational anomalies consistent with large masses moving through space, but could see nothing on any wavelength. The scientists ran diagnostics, convinced their instruments were broken. They weren't. Ambassador Zelthar, the Zetherian who had killed Mei Chen, found himself unable to sleep. His quarters on Council Prime were in the most secure section of the most protected station in the galaxy. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. His guards dismissed his concerns as guilt-driven paranoia. Then came the messages. Simple text files appeared on his personal computer, bypassing every security measure. They contained no threats, just information. The names of his family members back on the Zetherian homeworld. His private schedule. Details of conversations he'd had in rooms that were supposed to be completely secure. The final message was the most frightening. "We know everything. We've always known. We're just waiting for the right moment. Zelthar reported this to Council Security, who conducted a thorough investigation. They found no evidence of intrusion, no traces of hacking, no signs that anyone had access to systems. The messages had simply appeared as if written by a ghost. Maybe we should reconsider our position, suggested one of the younger council members, a Drelix who had always advocated for peaceful solutions. Perhaps we could reopen negotiations with Earth, offer additional compensation. We will not bow to terrorism, roared Threx. If humans think they can intimidate us with ghost stories and parlor tricks, they're mistaken. The Council commands 47 species, millions of warships, and the industrial might of 1,000 worlds. Whatever they're planning, we can crush it. But even Threx's confidence was shaken when the deep space sensor network went dark. Thousands of automated sensors, spread throughout Council space, all stopped transmitting at the same moment. For 6 hours, the Council was blind to half of their territory. When the network came back online, everything appeared normal. But the technicians who investigated found subtle changes in the programming, tiny alterations that suggested someone had not just accessed the network, but had rewritten parts of it from the inside. They were inside our most secure systems, Dr. Yira reported to an emergency council session. They could have destroyed everything. Instead, they just looked around. And they left a message. What message? Asked the Arbiter. Dr. Yira displayed it on the main screen. It was an image, a simple photograph of Mei Chen smiling at the camera in her school uniform. Below it, a single line of text. We remember. Ambassador Kirthax stood, his feathers flat against his body in a gesture of extreme concern. We need to face the truth. Humanity didn't join the Council seeking friendship. They joined to study us, to understand our technology and capabilities. While we thought we were teaching them, they were learning everything they needed to defeat us. Defeat us? The Arbiter's laugh was hollow. They're one species. We are 47. Numbers don't matter if they can move unseen through our space, access our computers, and apparently have developed technology we can't even detect. Kirthax pulled up a star chart showing human space. Look at this. Really look. We know they have 300 warships because they showed us 300 warships. But what if that was just what they wanted us to see? The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Every species in the Council had shared their military capabilities when joining, a requirement for mutual defense. Humanity had complied, showing their fleet, their bases, their production capacity. But what if it had all been theater? What if the real human military had been hidden all along? The Shadow Navy, whispered Dr. Yira. It's not a myth. It's real, and it's been building in the darkness while we congratulated ourselves on bringing humanity into civilized space. Threx slammed his massive fist on the table. Then we find it. We mobilize every ship, scan every cubic meter of space if we have to. Nothing can hide forever. But even as he spoke, another report came in. 3 more monitoring stations had gone dark. And this time the stations were deep inside Council territory, nowhere near human space. The Shadow Navy wasn't at the border anymore. It was already inside. Ambassador Kirthax looked around the chamber at his fellow council members and saw fear taking root. The humans had been silent for 3 months, but that silence was more terrifying than any declaration of war could have been, because silence meant they were working. And when they finally broke that silence, the galaxy would discover what humanity had been preparing for all along. The Zetherian homeworld was a jewel in the galaxy, a planet of crystalline cities and gardens that glowed with bioluminescent life. It was protected by one of the most sophisticated defense networks ever created. Thousands of satellites, weapons platforms, and sensor arrays that watched every approach vector. Nothing could reach the planet without being detected, analyzed, and either welcomed or destroyed. On the morning of the 4th month after Mei Chen's death, every single defensive system simply stopped working. The technicians in the Orbital Defense Center stared at their screens in confusion as systems went dark one by one. Not damaged, not hacked in any way they could detect, just offline. Power was still flowing. All diagnostics showed green, but the satellites weren't responding to commands. Try manual override, ordered the shift commander, her crystalline form refracting the emergency lights with agitated intensity. Nothing happened. The satellites continued to orbit exactly as before, but they were deaf and blind to all commands. The weapons platforms that should have been charged and ready showed zero power. The sensors that should have been scanning space returned only static. For 3 hours, the Zetherian homeworld was completely defenseless. In that time, the planet's long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures throughout their system. The readings suggested objects larger than anything in the Zetherian fleet, perhaps larger than anything the Council had ever built. But when visual telescopes turned toward those signatures, they showed nothing but empty space. Ships were dispatched to investigate. They found no trace of whatever had generated those readings. It was as if ghosts had moved through their system, leaving only the faintest hints of their passage. Then, 3 hours and 17 minutes after the blackout began, all systems came back online simultaneously. Everything worked perfectly as if nothing had happened. But there was one change that made every Zytherian's blood run cold. Someone had burned a message into their moon's surface. The words were written in precise plasma strikes, each letter 20 kilometers tall, clearly visible from the planet's surface. This is mercy. Next time, we take the planet. The galactic news networks exploded with the story. The Zetherians were a Tier 1 military power, one of the founding members of the Council. Their defenses had been considered impregnable. Yet someone had rendered them helpless and left a message that could be seen by every citizen looking up at their night sky. The Council convened an emergency session, but this time the confident speeches were absent. Fear had taken root in the hearts of species that had dominated the galaxy for millennia. "How is this possible?" demanded Threx, the Korvax defense minister. "We've analyzed the data from the Zetherian system 100 times. The energy signatures suggest vessels of immense size, but we can't see them, can't track them, can't even determine how they move through space." Dr. Yura presented her findings with trembling hands. "The physics don't make sense by our understanding. These vessels would need to generate enormous amounts of heat, which should be detectable across the spectrum. Instead, we detect nothing until they choose to reveal themselves through energy discharge. It's as if they can somehow store all thermal output indefinitely." "That's impossible," stated a Verixian engineer. "The laws of thermodynamics don't apply to whatever the humans have built," Dr. Yira interrupted. "Or they've found a way to work around them that we can't comprehend." Admiral Jexnor, Supreme Commander of Council Defense Forces, finally requested access to the classified files Earth had submitted when joining the Council. These were documents that every member species provided: detailed histories, technological capabilities, military doctrine. They were typically reviewed briefly and then filed away, considered more ceremonial than practical. No one had bothered to really read humanity's submission. They were new, primitive, not worth the time. Now, as Jexnor scrolled through the documents, he felt his confidence crumble. The humans had submitted a comprehensive military history spanning thousands of years. Wars fought with sticks and stones, then bronze and iron, then gunpowder and nuclear weapons. The files detailed humanity's entire evolution as a species, but with a particular focus on one consistent theme: the assumption that someone was always watching. "Listen to this," Jexnor said, projecting a section of the human files. "This is from their early space age, centuries before they achieved interstellar flight. If we can detect them, they can detect us. Therefore, all deep space military development must assume hostile observation. Stealth is not an advantage, it is the foundation." He pulled up another document. "They've been planning for hostile first contact since before they left their own planet. Every space station, every colony, every ship they've built has been designed with the assumption that someone out there wants to destroy them. But we welcomed them peacefully," protested one of the council members. "Did we?" Kirthak stood, his voice heavy with realization. "We told them about the Sovereign Species Act. We showed them a galaxy where the strong can kill the weak with impunity, as long as they follow the right legal procedures. From a human perspective, we demonstrated exactly the threat they'd been preparing for." Jexnor continued reading. "They have a term, mutually assured destruction. It defined their nuclear age. The idea that survival depends on the ability to retaliate so completely that no one dares attack first. They didn't come to the Council seeking protection. They came because they'd already built something that could destroy us, and they wanted to see if they'd need to use it." The chamber fell into shocked silence. The implications were staggering. While the Council had congratulated itself on bringing humanity into civilized space, Humans had been conducting the most extensive intelligence operation in galactic history. The Shadow Navy, whispered Dr. Yira. It's not something they built after the incident. It's what they built before they ever made contact with us. More evidence emerged over the following days. Intelligence agencies across the galaxy began sharing information they'd previously kept secret, trying to understand the full scope of the threat. The picture that emerged was terrifying in its implications. Human freighters that had traveled through Council space for years had been carrying scanning equipment disguised as cargo. Human diplomats had been mapping defense networks under the guise of cultural exchange. Human scientists working on joint research projects had been studying Council technology not to learn from it, but to find its weaknesses. A Drellic spy working deep in the human underground finally managed to send back a report before going silent. It contained a single piece of information that changed everything. The Shadow Navy had been under construction for 60 years, using resources mined from asteroids in deep space, far from any planet that might detect them. The construction sites themselves were mobile, enormous factory ships that could fold up and move if threatened. 60 years, repeated Thrax in disbelief. They've been building this fleet for 60 years? Since before they made first contact with us, confirmed Kirthax. They detected our signals, studied our broadcasts, and began preparing for war before they ever said hello. The scope was beyond anything the Council had imagined. While humanity's visible fleet consisted of 300 warships, reports now suggested the Shadow Navy numbered in the tens of thousands. Massive vessels built in the darkness, powered by fusion reactors whose heat was somehow captured and stored, made invisible by technology that bent light and radiation around them like water flowing around a stone. But it wasn't just the ships. The humans had seeded Council space with countless stealth drones, small devices no larger than a fist that clung to the hulls of vessels, hid in asteroid fields, and nestled in the infrastructure of stations. They watched, listened, and reported back through quantum-entangled communication that left no trace. They know everything, said Dr. Yira, reviewing the analysis. Every ship we have, every base, every defensive position. They've been watching us for years and we never noticed. A junior analyst raised a trembling hand. Doctor, if they have that many vessels, that much capability, why haven't they attacked? Why just the warning on the Zitherian moon? The question hung in the air. It was Kirthax who finally answered. Because they're not conquerors. They're parents who lost a child. They don't want to rule us. They want justice, and they're showing us that they have the power to take it whenever they choose. Ambassador Zelthar had been silent throughout the session, his usual arrogance stripped away by fear. Now he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. What do they want? As if in answer, every communication screen in the Council chambers activated simultaneously. The security breaches that should have been impossible happened anyway. A human face appeared, Admiral Patricia Okonkwo, commander of Earth's military forces. Members of the Galactic Council, she began, her voice calm and controlled. For 3 months you've wondered what we were doing. Now you know. You've seen a fraction of what we can do. The Zitherian homeworld was a demonstration, nothing more. We could have destroyed their planet. We chose not to. She leaned forward, her eyes hard as stone. You have 1 week to respond to our terms. Dissolve the Council. Submit every justified killing under your Sovereign Species Act to an independent tribunal. Deliver Ambassador Zelthar to Earth for trial under human law. Refuse, and we will show you what the Shadow Navy can really do. The transmission ended. The Council chambers erupted in panicked conversation, but Jexnor knew it was already over. They couldn't fight an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't track, and couldn't understand. The humans had spent decades preparing for this moment. The ghosts in the dark had finally spoken, and their message was clear. Humanity would have justice for Mei Chen no matter the cost. The Council's response to Earth's ultimatum was exactly what Admiral Okonkwo had predicted. Defiance born of pride and terror in equal measure. They couldn't accept the terms. To dissolve the Council would mean admitting that their entire system of governance was built on injustice. To submit Ambassador Zelthar for trial would establish a precedent that no species' laws were sovereign anymore. And to review thousands of years of justified killings would expose atrocities that some members desperately wanted to keep hidden. We will not bow to threats, declared the Arbiter in a galaxy-wide broadcast. The Galactic Council has maintained peace and order for 3 millennia. We will not allow one species, no matter their technological advantages, to tear down what we have built. The Council stands united. But behind the brave words, panic spread through the leadership. Military commanders scrambled to develop strategies against an enemy they couldn't see. Scientists worked around the clock trying to develop sensors that could detect the Shadow Navy. Diplomats sent secret messages to Earth, begging for separate peace deals that would spare their species from what was coming. Threx, the Korvax defense minister, rallied what he claimed would be the largest fleet ever assembled. Numbers still matter, he insisted during the War Council meeting. They can't fight all of us at once, no matter how invisible they are. We'll converge on human space from every direction. They'll have to reveal themselves to defend their worlds. Admiral Jexnor was less confident. And if they don't defend conventionally? If they simply appear inside our formations already among our ships? Then we fire anyway, Threx growled. Better to risk hitting our own vessels than to let them pick us apart. The fleet that assembled was truly massive. Over 50,000 warships from across the Council. Dreadnoughts the size of cities. Carriers launching thousands of fighters, weapons platforms capable of destroying planets. It was the accumulated military might of 47 civilizations, and it moved toward human space like an avalanche of steel and fire. The human colonies on the border went on high alert. Civilian populations were evacuated to underground shelters. The 300 visible human warships took up defensive positions, their crews ready to die protecting their homes. But the Shadow Navy remained hidden. They're afraid, Threx announced as the Council fleet approached the human border. They know they can't win. All their tricks and stealth technology mean nothing against this force. Kirthax, monitoring from Council Prime, wasn't so sure. He'd been watching the human response carefully. There was no panic, no desperate last-minute diplomacy, no sign of a civilization facing extinction. Just quiet preparation and an almost eerie calm. The Council fleet crossed into human space. Sensors showed the 300 human warships ahead, arranged in standard defensive formations. It looked like it would be a conventional battle after all, one the Council couldn't possibly lose. Then everything changed. The Shadow Navy decloaked. It didn't happen all at once. First, a dozen massive vessels appeared directly in the center of the Council formation. Then 100 more materialized around the fleet's perimeter. Then thousands, then tens of thousands. They came into being like ghosts becoming solid, emerging from nothingness to fill the space between stars. The Council fleet found itself completely surrounded. But more than that, the human vessels were between their ships, woven through the formation like threads through cloth. Some were so close that their hulls nearly touched Council vessels. The humans had been there all along, invisible, waiting. "All ships, fire," ordered Thrax, but Jexnor countermanded him immediately. "Belay that order. If we fire, we'll hit our own ships. They're too close, too mixed in with our formation." The tactical situation was impossible. The Council fleet was inside a cage they hadn't known existed. Every firing solution would hit friendly vessels. Every possible retreat vector was blocked. They were trapped in a formation that had been perfectly designed to neutralize their numerical advantage. "This is Admiral Okonkwo," came the broadcast on all frequencies. "You are surrounded. Your weapons are useless, but we're not here to destroy you. We're here to show you something." Every ship in the Council fleet suddenly displayed the same image on their view screens. Not the external view, those were being overridden. Instead, they showed live feeds from inside their own vessels. Bridge views showing officers at their stations. Engineering decks with crew monitoring reactors. Crew quarters where off-duty personnel were sleeping or eating or talking with friends. The humans had been inside their ships. For hours, maybe days, invisible infiltration drones had moved through every corridor, mapped every space, positioned themselves to watch everything. The Council fleet had been compromised from within before the battle even began. "We could have vented your atmosphere," Admiral Okonkwo continued, her voice carrying across the fleet. "We could have overloaded your reactors. We could have killed every person in your fleet at any moment. We chose not to." On his flagship, Admiral Jexnor watched footage of himself in his ready room from just an hour earlier. He'd been talking to his aide about his family, about his children back home. The humans had been there, invisible, listening. They could have killed him then. They could have killed everyone. "Stand down," he ordered quietly, his voice carrying the weight of absolute defeat. "All ships, power down weapons and shields." "It's over." "No." Threx's voice crackled with fury. "We can still..." It's over, Jexnor repeated louder this time. They've won. They won before we even left port. Maybe they won years ago when they first made contact with us. We just didn't know it. The Council fleet powered down. Thousands of warships. The pride of 47 civilizations. Rendered helpless not through destruction, but through the simple demonstration that humanity could kill them whenever they chose. Dr. Yira, analyzing the data from her station on Council Prime, finally understood the full scope of what humanity had accomplished. They didn't just build invisible ships, she reported to the emergency council session. They created an entire shadow infrastructure throughout our space. Drones, sensors, probably even automated weapons platforms. They've been living in the spaces between our sensors, in the blind spots we didn't know we had. For how long? Asked the Arbiter, their ancient confidence finally broken. Since before we met them, they detected our signals, studied our technology remotely, and began infiltrating our space before first contact. By the time they introduced themselves, they already had us mapped, analyzed, and neutralized. Kirthak stood, his feathers drooping with exhaustion. They learned from their own history. Humans have been invaded, colonized, enslaved by other humans throughout their past. They understood that meeting new species could mean meeting predators. So they prepared. They made sure that if we proved to be a threat, they could eliminate us. But they didn't eliminate us, pointed out one of the younger council members. Why not? They clearly have the capability. The answer came in another transmission from Admiral Okonkwo. This time, Dr. Sarah Chen appeared beside her, May's mother, the scientist who had lost her daughter to Zetherian arrogance. We don't want to destroy you, Sarah said, her voice heavy with grief but steady with purpose. We want to change you. The Galactic Council has allowed injustice to flourish for millennia under the guise of cultural sovereignty. You've permitted the strong to abuse the weak, as long as they followed the proper legal procedures. She pulled up a holographic display showing thousands of names, scrolling endlessly. These are the victims of the Sovereign Species Act. 4 million individuals from less powerful species, killed over 3,000 years by council members who faced no consequences. Children, civilians, innocents who made simple mistakes and paid with their lives. The list kept scrolling, name after name, species after species. The true cost of the council's system laid bare for all to see. My daughter was just the latest, Sarah continued. But she'll be the last. You will accept our terms. Not because we'll destroy you if you don't, but because you know we can. And you'll spend every day from now on knowing that the Shadow Navy is watching, waiting to ensure you never forget this lesson. Ambassador Zelthar watched the transmission from his quarters, his crystalline body trembling. He'd killed a child over a flower, confident in his legal right to do so. Now he understood what that had cost. Not just May's life, but the entire galactic order. What will happen to me? He asked the guard outside his door. The guard, a normally stoic Korvax, answered with unusual gentleness. You'll face human justice, whatever that means. In the council chambers, the vote was unanimous. They would accept Earth's terms. The Galactic Council would dissolve. An independent tribunal would review the thousands of cases of justified killings. Ambassador, Zelthar would be surrendered to Earth, and the galaxy would learn to live under the watchful eyes of the Shadow Navy, the invisible guardians who had emerged from the darkness to ensure that never again would the strong prey upon the weak without consequence. The reckoning had come, and humanity had won without firing a single shot. The dissolution of the Galactic Council happened with surprising speed. 3,000 years of accumulated bureaucracy, tradition, and power structures came apart in just 6 weeks. Some species resisted, clinging to the old ways, but the sight of the Shadow Navy's demonstration had broken their will to fight. Others actually welcomed the change. Species who had always been on the receiving end of the Sovereign Species Act, who had swallowed their grief and anger for generations. The tribunal began its work in a neutral space station, hastily constructed by human engineers. It was simple, functional, and equipped with the most advanced sensors in the galaxy, a reminder that humans now held the technological edge. Representatives from every species were invited to participate, though humans carefully ensured they held no majority control. This had to be seen as legitimate, not a human puppet show. The results were devastating to examine. Over 3,000 years, the Council's Sovereign Species Act had enabled 4 million deaths. Some were accidents like Mei Chen's, Tragic misunderstandings that turned lethal because powerful species refused to show mercy. Others were far worse. Deliberate killings disguised as legal acts, purges of unwanted populations, revenge killings dressed up as justice. The Virixian delegation presented evidence of a case from 800 years ago when a Drelix colony world had been destroyed because a single Drelix merchant had accidentally insulted a Virixian noble. 2 billion dead, ruled justified under cultural sovereignty laws. The Avilian hierarchy revealed records of systematic abuse by the Korvax, who had used the act to eliminate business competitors by charging them with cultural violations. Even the peaceful, philosophical species had blood on their hands. Everyone had used the system to their advantage at some point. Everyone had let injustice slide when it benefited them. "We were all guilty," Kirthax announced in his testimony. "We knew the system was wrong, but it gave us power, so we accepted it. It took humanity, a species we considered primitive, to show us what we had become." Ambassador Zelthar was brought to Earth in a human prisoner transport. He had expected rage, violence, perhaps summary execution. Instead, he was taken to a facility that looked more like a garden than a prison. Human guards were polite but distant. The trial was conducted with scrupulous attention to legal procedure, Sarah Chen testified, describing the moment she watched her daughter die. The courtroom, filled with human and alien observers, sat in silence as she spoke. When she finished, there wasn't a dry eye among the humans present, and many aliens displayed their species' equivalent of grief. "He killed my daughter over a flower," Sarah said quietly, "because his culture said a plant was worth more than a child's life. I want him to understand what that means. I want him to feel the weight of what he destroyed." The verdict was guilty. The sentence shocked the galaxy. Ambassador Zelthar was sentenced to life, but not in a prison. He would spend the rest of his years in a botanical garden on Earth, tending to plants from every species in the galaxy, including Zetherian lumina flowers. He would nurture life instead of taking it, learn to value what he had so carelessly destroyed. "You took a life in defense of a flower," the human judge told him. "Now you will spend your existence understanding that both lives and flowers have value, and that nothing justifies killing a child." It was a punishment that only humans could have designed, forcing someone to become better rather than simply suffer. Many aliens found it confusing. Some thought it too lenient. Others recognized it as perhaps the most profound punishment possible, forcing someone to face what they had done every single day, forever. The new galactic government formed slowly. It had no single name, no grand title. It was simply called the Assembly, a gathering of equals where every species had a voice, and no one's cultural laws permitted harm to another species' citizens. The rules were simple and absolute. No species could claim sovereignty over the life of another species' citizens. Any incident between species would be judged by a mixed tribunal using principles of proportionality and basic sapient rights. Cultural differences would be respected, but never at the cost of innocent life. And above it all, unstated but universally understood, was the presence of the Shadow Navy. They remained mostly invisible, but every species knew they were there, watching, waiting, ready to ensure that the lessons learned in blood would not be forgotten. Admiral Okonkwo addressed the first assembly session, though she appeared only by hologram. The Shadow Navy's command structure remained hidden, a deliberate choice. They would not rule the galaxy. They would only ensure that no one else ruled it through fear and violence. "We don't want your worship," she said bluntly. "We don't want your gratitude. We want you to be better, to remember that every species has children, families, people they love, to understand that no cultural tradition, no religious law, no political expedience justifies taking innocent life." Some species bristled at this. The Zetherians in particular struggled with the new reality. Their entire culture was built around the sanctity of certain plants and places. Now they were being told that a trespassing child's life mattered more than their sacred spaces. But resistance was futile, and everyone knew it. The humans had proven they could strike anywhere, anytime, with perfect precision. More importantly, they'd proven they were willing to show restraint, but only as long as others did the same. Trade resumed, slowly at first. Human colonies reopened their ports. Human goods began flowing again through galactic markets. But there were differences now. Human freighters moved through space with quiet confidence, no longer the nervous newcomers trying to fit in. They were the wolves among sheep, and everyone knew it. Human diplomats approached negotiations differently, too. Gone was the eagerness to please, the careful deference to older civilizations. They spoke as equals, or perhaps more than equals. They had leverage now, and they weren't shy about using it when they needed to protect their interests or those of weaker species. Dr. Yira continued her research, now with human collaboration. She was one of the few aliens granted limited access to human stealth technology. Not the full specifications, but enough to understand the principles. What she learned astonished her. They didn't just make a technological breakthrough, she explained in a lecture at the new Galactic Science Academy. They changed their entire approach to space travel. Every human vessel, from the smallest shuttle to the largest dreadnought, is designed with stealth as the foundation. They don't add stealth technology to ships, they build ships around stealth technology. She pulled up a comparison. Our vessels are designed to be seen, to project power, to announce our presence. Human vessels are designed to be invisible, until they choose otherwise. It's a fundamental difference in philosophy that reflects how they view the universe, as a place where being seen means being targeted. This philosophy gradually began influencing other species. New ship designs incorporated human principles, though without the full stealth capabilities. The galaxy was adapting to a new reality where visibility was vulnerability. 5 years after Mei Chen's death, Sarah Chen was invited to address the assembly. She stood before representatives of every species in the galaxy, no longer just a grieving mother but a symbol of the change humanity had forced upon the stars. My daughter died because your system valued tradition over life, she began. She died because no one thought to ask whether ancient laws made sense when applied to innocent children. She died because you forgot the most basic principle that should unite all intelligent species, the protection of the vulnerable. She paused, looking around the chamber. My daughter's death wasn't meaningless. It revealed the truth about your galactic order, and it gave humanity the moral authority to demand change. But that change isn't finished. It will never be finished. Every generation must choose to value life over law, compassion over tradition, justice over convenience. She gestured to the holographic displays showing the Shadow Navy, or at least the parts humans were willing to reveal. Massive vessels hanging in space, visible reminders of invisible power. You ask when we'll share our technology, when we'll level the playing field. The answer is simple: when we trust you. When we believe that you've internalized these lessons so deeply that you no longer need us watching over you. When the protection of innocent life becomes as natural to you as breathing. She smiled sadly. Maybe that day will come. Maybe our children's children will live in a galaxy where the Shadow Navy is just a historical curiosity, where no one needs invisible guardians to ensure justice. Until then, we'll be watching. Always watching. The speech ended. Sarah returned to Earth, to the garden where Ambassador Zelthar tended flowers under human supervision. She visited sometimes, not to confront him, but to see her daughter's memory honored in this strange way. Zelthar would bow to her, his crystalline form reflecting the sunlight through the greenhouse glass, and they would walk among the plants in silence. He was learning. Slowly, painfully, he was understanding what he had taken. It would never be enough. No punishment could equal May's loss. But it was something, a start. Above Earth, invisible to every sensor except those humans chose to activate, the Shadow Navy maintained its vigil. Thousands of vessels in the darkness watching the galaxy with eternal patience. They had shown themselves once, proven their power, and then faded back into the void. But everyone knew they were there. Every diplomat negotiating a treaty, every species considering their actions, every powerful individual who might be tempted to abuse the weak. All of them knew that somewhere in the darkness, humans were watching. And if they forgot, if they fell back into old patterns, the Shadow Navy would remind them. Not with destruction. Humans had proven they preferred justice to vengeance, but with the undeniable demonstration that some lines could not be crossed without consequences. The galaxy had learned its lesson. The strong could no longer prey upon the weak with impunity. Cultural sovereignty ended where another species' children began. And while humanity had been forced to become the galaxy's guardians, they wore that responsibility with grim determination rather than pride. They had never wanted this role. They had wanted to explore the stars, to make friends, to learn from older civilizations. But when the galaxy had shown them that friendship meant accepting injustice, they had chosen a different path. They had called forth the Shadow Navy, and in doing so, they had changed the galaxy forever. Sarah Chen stood in her garden surrounded by flowers from 100 worlds and looked up at the stars. Somewhere up there, her daughter's death had meaning. Somewhere in the darkness, invisible guardians ensured that no other parent would have to feel this pain. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. And humanity would make sure it lasted forever.